Here we are, the meeting room, said the Valdarian. Take a seat and we shall soon begin. Elias followed the orders and sat in one of the seats that were presented. The other 5 members of the council soon appeared in a flash of light, all members of different species and races that all glowed of wisdom and power. It seemed Elias was a little fish in a big pond. Greetings, Dr. Elias Thorne, boomed the leader of the council. We have heard much about your exploits and what you have managed to accomplish. Today you are here to finally prove how it is that humans have managed to not only interact with such creatures, but what we can learn from it. Humans do not dominate apex predators. Elias began, his voice echoing in the vast, ornate chamber. He looked around at the assembled faces, a kaleidoscope of alien morphologies. Their eyes, varied and alien, all focused intently upon him. He tried to ignore the sheer absurdity of the situation, a humble marine biologist from Earth lecturing the governing body of a galactic alliance on the subtleties of predator-prey relationships. You've seen me with sharks, yes, but you've also heard of me. The thing with the sharks isn't really about taking control. This is something that most of the world has trouble understanding. Apex predators all have one thing in common, and that's respect. If you do not respect what they do, then you are most likely going to end up dead. It's as simple as that. That seemed to set them in thought as various heads started to turn, some talking within their small groups, as they tried to discuss what Thorne had said. It was the reptilian aliens that first started to respond. Fascinating, it had always been thought that we must use superior firepower to overcome these threats, but never respect, said the aliens in their hissing voice. If there is true understanding and respect, however, then the same predator might be tamed. Is that what you're saying? Elias nodded. That's right, he said. If you truly try to find a way to meet their needs. If you listen to what they want to achieve, then you may find yourself with an excellent partner instead of an enemy. If we are truly trying to dominate these apex predators, then what makes us so different from the beasts? The crowd seemed to respond positively, but Elias could see a wrinkle in one of their foreheads. He could guess that there was a point that it did not agree on. You are telling me, they responded, that despite their potential killing power, that the humans have never attempted to weaponize. I highly doubt that, considering your planet's track record. And that is precisely the reason why they hired me, isn't it? I know enough to have all of my words come with the proper context, and why you guys should do better, Elias responded. The crowd was shocked into silence once more as they knew Thorne had spoken the truth. It seemed that Earth did have a propensity to war amongst themselves. That's when another of the participants had started to talk, which Elias recognized as a type of alien that mostly operated with logic. What method do you employ then? You call upon empathy and feelings, which we have deemed is ineffective in many cases of apex predators, said the logic alien. With a predator, the most common method for defense is offense. And that is a great strategy, when it works, said Elias. What happens when the technology fails and you have to fend for yourself? Will you cower in fear, or will you respond to them in a way that they will understand? Most predators are just trying to survive in an ever-changing environment. They won't just attack you for no reason. With this small speech, all of the leaders finally seemed to calm down, but there would only be one way to prove what Elias was talking about. I think it is time to test your mettle, human, said the head of the council. If what you say is true, then it should be easy to demonstrate what you mean. They had all come to the conclusion that they must find an apex predator for him to interact with, something that the Stellar Alliance had previously failed to contain. Elias was up to the task. After all, what was another sea monster compared to the whole galaxy? Chapter 5, The Cage's Embrace. You want me to do what? Elias asked. We have received word of a species that has been attacking our outposts, Dr. Thorne. Morrow responded. We have them contained, but not analyzed. We have tried everything, but it all seems to fail. Dorv responded. Not even weapons are able to put any type of dent in it. So you have something, then what makes it so important that you need someone like me? Elias responded. This, whatever it is, acts differently than any predator that we have seen before in all of our lives, Dr. Thorne. Zinther interjected. While it attacks with brute force, many say that it's not even trying. If the records are to be believed, there is actually a high sense of intelligence in it. It has even taken prisoners before. Prisoners? Elias interjected. Yes, to unknown means, said Morrill. For what reason are you able to surmise, Dr. Thorne? I'll be able to give you a better idea once I see them, Elias responded. But you know what, maybe I can work with it a little bit before you guys blast me off with it. Do you guys think you can set up a system with the apex predator before, that way I can at least test out what I can do? To the protest of many in the Stellar Alliance, they had decided it best to heed Elias's warnings before actually putting him into battle. This would be the first time in the Stellar Alliance that they had employed such methods. There was definitely a sense of anticipation all around. The test is going to be ready soon, Dr. Thorne, said Morrill through the comms. Do be careful, we were barely able to contain this one, and if you fail, well, that might just be the end. I understand, said Elias. Let's do this. With that, he was brought into the holding cell of the newest apex predator the Stellar Alliance had to offer. It was in a large box, one that was not too dissimilar to the type that humans would find in their own zoos, if not a little bit more advanced. He noticed the lack of any sort of visible entrance. Dr. Thorne. It was Zinther on the other end. You must activate the force field, after that the machine will slowly introduce you into the chamber. If you get into contact with the wall, you may be seriously injured. Gotcha, Elias replied, as he prepared himself and pushed the button, activating the array. There was a slight hum as the walls began to fade, and now Elias and whatever lay in the other room were face to face with each other. It was bigger than anything Elias could ever have imagined. In his years working with some of the most amazing sea creatures, he thought he'd seen it all. Yet this, whatever this was in a different league entirely. In size alone it dwarfed Kythar, let alone any of Earth's creatures. Its body was a mass of rock, steel, and flesh all intertwined in a way that made Elias's stomach squirm. How any of this was possible was completely beyond his comprehension. He turned his head, and in its gaze saw a burning fury that couldn't be described in any language. He knew it was time to act. He spoke clearly, his voice loud for all to hear. "Hello there," said Elias. "I can see that you don't exactly want me here. I can see you are in pain too, with all the things they have done to you." Elias continued, attempting to reason with the alien beast. To his shock and to the shock of everyone watching, the massive creature spoke back, telepathically directly into Elias's mind. "I can hear you," it stated. "Are you here to hurt me?" Elias responded. "No, in fact, I plan on getting you out of here if you allow it." To this, the creature pondered before speaking up. "Do not lie to me, human," said the creature. "You come from a world of killers. I have seen what you do to those of your own kind." "I know it must seem that way," replied Elias. "But let me tell you something. Just because my species has those elements doesn't mean that I agree with it, or am one of them. I have spent my whole life with what the world considers as dangerous. I know enough to be considered one, but that is simply not true, and not how I want to live." Elias could only hope what he said had somehow landed on sympathetic ears. But before he could prepare any further, the massive beast began to glow a bright red. Elias immediately braced, but to his surprise it turned to the walls of the prison, and slammed against them in a furious rage. "Then you must help me put an end to this prison," said the beast. "I will listen to your calls." With what he heard, Elias nodded and transmitted everything back to the Stellar Alliance, including what it could do. They were not thrilled with the idea of letting it loose, however, seeing the potential for an even larger threat than what they already had before. "Elias, get out of there! We cannot permit to let such a dangerous beast to roam free. Just go, we are ordering you to leave!" Morrill was shouting through the comms. "I cannot let you two risk more of the Alliance." Elias thought about it, before coming to a final choice. Elias turned off the communication system, before walking up to the prison. He placed his hands over it, before speaking out. "Sorry, boys, but I can't exactly let this guy down like that," said Elias. "It's about respect. The next thing he had done was completely turn off the force field and give the beast what he wanted. He had completely trusted an apex predator, when it very well could have chosen his life for death. It instead chose to listen. That respect was reciprocated. Kaidar then turned towards the walls of the enclosure, and with all of its strength slammed into them. The vibrations of each blow felt like an earthquake, but Kaidar continued to press with its attacks, trying its very best to open a pathway for escape. As Elias stood by the Leviathan, he couldn't help but start to prepare for whatever was about to come next. He could only hope to keep himself out of the beast's way as it used everything that it had to destroy its prison. "It has almost broken through the perimeter," said Dorv. "It would be almost ready for a clean escape. Let us hope this beast does not decide to kill you instead." That's when everything seemed to go wrong again. Before any of the crew could respond, Kaidar had completely broken open the wall. Before Kaidar could celebrate its escape, however, countless turrets and machines descended all around it. It seemed that those that had disagreed with Elias had managed to finally gain control, and were going to use the opportunity to kill them all. Before Elias could do anything, Kaidar had already started to smash the machinery, and began to speak to him again. "The outside, I can feel it, show me," said Kaidar. "I am ready to end this." "Are you sure?" "That's a one-way trip, buddy, there's no coming back after that," responded Elias. There was a pause. "I was created for that," said Kaidar. "It's what I was always meant to do. Do you accept?" A lump had formed in his throat. Elias didn't want for that to be the end for this magnificent beast. But if it was truly what it desired, then so shall it be. Elias responded. "Lead the way." With a nod, Kaidar then charged directly at the outside. "No, stop him!" Morel shouted through the comms. "He's going to destroy everything." Of course, it had been too late. All of the crew could only watch on in horror as Kaidar began smashing through every barricade and door on the way out of the facility. What was also terrifying was that Elias was completely behind him, seemingly unafraid of the beast that could end him in moments. "What are you doing, Thorne? You are destroying everything we have worked for," shouted Morel on the comm. "If you would have kept that control in you, then you wouldn't have to worry," responded Elias. "But here we are, because you wouldn't leave the beast alone." "There!" shouted Kaidar, through telepathic link. "I see outside. Get ready." Kaidar was right. The duo had finally made it to one of the exit ports. It was time to leave. After Elias readied himself, Kaidar then with all of its might ripped open the hatch and let all of the sea come through. "Remember our work, don't be like them!" Elias shouted at the other end, as he was ejected together with Kaidar away into the sea. As Elias landed back on the rescue boat, he could not help but smile as he heard about how the attack on Deep Echo. After hearing the details, he realized he was not alone in thinking what had occurred in Abysha was wrong. It turns out that the leak of the Kaidar was the action needed to finally have the board agree on to stop the weaponization of apex predators. It may not be today, but soon the galaxy will look into a new light. Perhaps after all this galaxy needed a Sea Madman to show them the way. The three Valdarians, their forms subtly distorted by the water and the Kraken's kisses' interior lighting, stood motionless, awaiting Elias's response. The silence was profound, broken only by the hum of the submersible's life support systems and the distant, rhythmic groaning of the Earth's crust miles beneath them. Elias, a man of action and instinct, found himself paralyzed by the sheer improbability of the moment. "The Stellar Alliance," he finally echoed, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "I've read about you. In heavily redacted reports, mostly. And ancient mariner tales, which I always attributed to delirium brought on by scurvy." Zinther, the leader of the trio, tilted his head slightly, a gesture that seemed both curious and faintly amused. "We understand that your understanding of interstellar politics may be limited. Suffice it to say, we are a collective of sentient species dedicated to maintaining order and promoting knowledge throughout the known galaxies." "Order? Knowledge? Sounds bureaucratic," Elias countered, a hint of his usual sardonic wit returning. "And what does any of this have to do with me, swimming around in a glorified tin can, trying to understand why Krakens are so fond of bioluminescent squid. Your work, Dr. Thorne. The second Valdarian, the one with the more fluid, almost liquid movements, spoke for the first time. Demonstrates a unique approach to the study of apex predators. A respect, perhaps, is a better term that transcends the typical fear and aversion. Fear and aversion are healthy, sensible reactions, Elias retorted. These are apex predators, after all. They didn't get to the top of the food chain by being cuddly. Yet you swim among them, Zinther interjected. Without weapons. Without cages. Without the panic that seems to plague your colleagues. You observe. You learn. You connect. Elias frowned. I try to understand them. To see the world through their eyes. It's not about taming them, or conquering them. It's about coexistence. Knowing how they think, what motivates them, is the only way to survive. And it is precisely that perspective that we seek. Moral, the more softly spoken of the three aliens, said. The Stellar Alliance has encountered numerous species that exhibit predatory behaviors. Some are merely aggressive, others are far more dangerous. Dangerous how? Elias prompted, a flicker of scientific curiosity igniting within him. Capable of interstellar warfare. Consumption of entire planets. Manipulation of reality itself. Zinther responded, his voice devoid of emotion. The Deathstalkers, on the other hand, represent a fraction of all these things at their peak. Nexus V has produced apex predator in both body and mind. And they're at the end of the leash that we are currently holding. So you need someone to understand your monsters? Elias asked, arching an eyebrow. That's an awful lot of faith to put in a human from a relatively backward planet. We have observed you, Dr. Thorne. For many years, said the third Valdarian who spoke. You may not possess the technology or the interstellar experience of our researchers, but you have something they lack. What do they even call it? Something with a killer instinct that they might be able to understand. The point is, no other has touched the skin of a great white and lived to tell the tale. I still don't get it, Elias said in response. There are many oceanologists on Earth, why not use one of them? That's precisely it, said the one speaking before. We want you. For 15 years you have been with the most deadly predators that we can see on your planet, and that's why we want you to look at Kaithar. To make him more powerful. It was that moment that Elias knew it was too good to be true. He's dealt with enough corporations to know that they only hire you for your usefulness. Now it was making too much sense. To actually be used for their weapon. What exactly do you want with my agreement then? Said Elias. I can't imagine a few words from my mouth is all you need from me. Indeed not, said Zinther. We were thinking something a lot more intimate than some words. That's when the three Valdarians around him had finally made their move. Before Elias could act, they had each pulled out technology that was used to push himself toward the depths of the ocean. Sorry, Thorne, but your time is now. There is no more waiting, shouted Zinther as the submersible was being pulled away. As quickly as everything had happened, he felt himself being pulled out of space and time. Goodbye, world, I'll see you when I see you. Elias spoke before shutting himself off. The three Valdarians, their forms subtly distorted by the water and the Kraken's kisses' interior lighting, stood motionless, awaiting Elias's response. The silence was profound, broken only by the hum of the submersible's life support systems and the distant, rhythmic groaning of the Earth's crust miles beneath them. Elias, a man of action and instinct, found himself paralyzed by the sheer improbability of the moment. The Stellar Alliance, he finally echoed, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. I've read about you. In heavily redacted reports, mostly. And ancient mariner tales, which I always attributed to delirium brought on by scurvy. Zinther, the leader of the trio, tilted his head slightly, a gesture that seemed both curious and faintly amused. We understand that your understanding of interstellar politics may be limited. Suffice it to say, we are a collective of sentient species dedicated to maintaining order and promoting knowledge throughout the known galaxies. Order? Knowledge? Sounds bureaucratic. Elias countered, a hint of his usual sardonic wit returning. And what does any of this have to do with me, swimming around in a glorified tin can, trying to understand why Krakens are so fond of bioluminescent squid? Your work, Dr. Thorne. The second Valdarian, the one with the more fluid, almost liquid movements, spoke for the first time. Demonstrates a unique approach to the study of apex predators. A respect, perhaps, is a better term that transcends the typical fear and aversion. Fear and aversion are healthy, sensible reactions, Elias retorted. These are apex predators, after all. They didn't get to the top of the food chain by being cuddly. Yet you swim among them, Zinther interjected. Without weapons. Without cages. Without the panic that seems to plague your colleagues. You observe. You learn. You connect. Elias frowned. I try to understand them. To see the world through their eyes. It's not about taming them, or conquering them. It's about coexistence. Knowing how they think, what motivates them, is the only way to survive. And it is precisely that perspective that we seek. Moral, the more softly spoken of the three aliens, said. The Stellar Alliance has encountered numerous species that exhibit predatory behaviors. Some are merely aggressive, others are far more dangerous. Dangerous how? Elias prompted, a flicker of scientific curiosity igniting within him. Capable of interstellar warfare. Consumption of entire planets. Manipulation of reality itself. Zinther responded, his voice devoid of emotion. The Deathstalkers, on the other hand, represent a fraction of all these things at their peak. Nexus V has produced apex predator in both body and mind. And they're at the end of the leash that we are currently holding. So you need someone to understand your monsters? Elias asked, arching an eyebrow. That's an awful lot of faith to put in a human from a relatively backward planet. We have observed you, Dr. Thorne. For many years, said the third Valdarian. You may not possess the technology or the interstellar experience of our researchers, but you have something they lack. What do they call it? The empathy. The point is, no other has touched the skin of a great white and lived to tell the tale. You make your offer sound interesting. I am willing to listen, said Elias, as he waited for them to reveal what they planned to do with him. Excellent. All you would have to do is accompany us to our research station, and all will be explained. Zinther said in a smile. Elias pondered on it for a bit, as there would definitely be risks joining it, but the curiosity, the call of the unknown, was all that it took for him to make his decision. Very well, let's be on our way, Elias responded. With that, the Kraken's kiss was taken into tow, and started its ascent to the surface. I'm afraid you can't bring the Kraken's kiss up here, said Morrow. Well, what am I going to do then? Responded Elias. Don't worry, we got you covered. We got what you need, responded Dorv. It was only then that Elias found out that they actually had another vessel that would take him to the main alien ship. There was something off about all of this, however. What do they need a human for? What do they truly intend to do with his existence? Too many questions, he thought. These were then pushed aside by seeing the alien vessel. It dwarfed his submarine, a colossal structure composed of metal and a strange organic material that seemed to pulse with a soft light. It had all been very cool and interesting, but he couldn't quite escape from the feeling that he was a tiny fish in a very, very large pond. That's when he was brought into the alien vessel that was all too alien to him. There was only so much a human could know to be ready for something like this. He hoped that what came next would be good enough. But for now, Elias was on the precipice of something far greater than himself, and he wasn't sure if he would make it out alive. Elias followed the Valdarians through the alien vessel, his senses overwhelmed by a sensory overload unlike anything he had ever experienced. The corridors were filled with the murmur of strange languages, the scent of exotic chemicals, and the sight of beings that defied description. Where are we going? Elias asked Zinther, struggling to maintain his composure amidst the chaos. To the sea thread, Zinther replied, his voice echoing slightly in the spacious corridor. It is a specialized vessel designed for traversing the extreme depths. It will be our transport to Abyssia. Elias had expected some form of shuttle, perhaps a modified version of his own submersible. What he found was something else entirely. This sea thread was less a vessel and more of a symbiotic construct, a fusion of technology and organic life. It was a long, slender creature, resembling a colossal jellyfish, its translucent bell pulsing with a soft, internal light. The crew moved around the vessel like ants in a colony, using organic ports and wires that seemed to meld seamlessly into the alien vessel's being. "It's alive," Elias said, awestruck. "Indeed," Zinta replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "The sea thread is a living vessel, grown and cultivated by the Valdarian people. It is capable of withstanding the immense pressures and navigating the treacherous currents of the Hadal Zone." As they approached the head of the creature, Elias saw an opening, revealing a small, circular chamber filled with shimmering, opalescent material. "This is the command center," said Morrel, gesturing towards the entrance. "Please enter." Elias hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The interior of the command center was unlike anything he had ever seen. There were no screens, no dials, no conventional controls. Instead, the chamber was filled with glowing, organic structures that pulsed and thrummed with energy. The Valdarians moved around him, interacting with the controls with a grace and fluidity that suggested a deep, almost symbiotic connection to the vessel. As they were being strapped into the seat-like structures, the entire pod began to shake before the familiar sensation of falling began. As they plummeted down to the depths, Elias had been allowed access to the ship's view screens. What presented itself was an alien beauty. As Elias was looking around in amazement, a voice pierced through all, once again belonged to Zinther, as he explained exactly what it was that they were seeing. "What you are seeing now, Dr. Thorne, are but only a few of the creatures that we had found here. There has to be something here for you as well, right? Something that you have never seen before?" Elias was all but completely silent, as all he could do was to bask in the magnificence of the sights. Fish that glowed more than anything he had ever seen. Crustaceans so large it resembled a bus. But then he spotted a rather strange-looking being. It was similar to what a manta ray would look like, but it instead had no mouth, rather, a long tube that it was using to suck up all of the small particles in front of it. What is that?" Elias exclaimed. "That is a filtration beast, the best that it can clean an area of all particles that are present. They evolved this way when their food source required it. A truly magnificent creature, isn't it?" said Zinther. Before Elias could respond, the vessel slowed, before stopping completely as they finally arrived. "We have arrived, Dr. Thorne, please get ready," spoke Morrel. And so they had. As before his very eyes, Elias looked at all of the beauty around them. He can now clearly make out all of the facility, as lights were guiding their entry point. Each and every piece of machinery was all working in sync, to show a grand display of art and technology. When you combine the structures with the flora and fauna, you will realize that they had constructed something far beyond than what it should have been. It was at that moment that a sense of home had overcome Elias, as if despite being so far from Earth that he was finally home. Before Elias can get lost in his thoughts again, the vessel had finally locked on and was entering the station. What came to be next was even more impressive than what he had seen before. The base was far larger than what one could imagine. Elias could only be grateful for not having claustrophobia. This place. What had humanity stumbled into? What would come next? What followed was a whirlwind of briefings, tours, and introductions. Elias, still reeling from the sheer scale and alien nature of Abyssia, found himself thrust into a world of interstellar politics, cutting-edge technology, and complex scientific theories that challenged everything he thought he knew about life in the universe. The Valdarian hierarchy was fascinatingly alien. Zinther and Morrel, it seemed, were key figures within Abyssia's research branches, but they had someone above them. He learned about the functions of this and that, and how it all made the world better, in theory. His initial days were spent getting acquainted with the lay of the land, learning the intricate workings of the station, and meeting the diverse team of researchers from across the Stellar Alliance. Elias had spent the next couple days adjusting to the new surroundings. The food was, surprisingly, palatable, mostly algae-based protein synthesizers that tasted like vaguely familiar Earth dishes. The sleep cycles were adjusted, but Elias never needed much more than 4 hours of sleep to begin with. The only thing that remained was to actually begin his work. He knew what he had to do. Finally, after a couple days, he was asked to show up to the Leviathan tank. It seemed the work he was contracted to do was finally about to come. "Dr. Thorne, you have quite the crowd," Dorv said as he gestured towards the glass. Elias immediately looked and saw a sizable crowd looking through the tank, almost like he was some kind of zoo animal. "I'll get used to it," responded Elias. There, too, he had seen the creature that the researchers had called Kaidar. As the two stared at each other for what seemed to be forever, Elias felt an intense sensation within his heart. For whatever reason, despite this beast being so far removed from himself in the evolutionary scale, and despite this beast's danger, he could not help but feel like he were meeting another part of himself. Before Elias knew it, Morrill had started to break in his thoughts to start explaining what the plans were. With hand gestures and head nods all around, Elias knew what he had to do. It was time to face Kaidar. With a quick dive, Elias entered into the alien ocean. For whatever reason, it held a peace that was so familiar to Elias that the thought made him tear up. Now it was time to focus on the work at hand. And that began by studying the creature. Through use of equipment that he'd been given, Elias worked to tag Kaidar. It was a tense situation, to say the least, as one wrong move could have meant the death of Elias. The beast, however, seemed to understand what Elias was trying to do, and followed the motions he was trying to signal. The thing with dealing with creatures and animals was that they weren't stupid, they know what is going on, and the same seems to be the case in the vacuum of space. As Thorne tagged Kaidar, he almost felt a connection with this beast. It was not a beast, rather, a being, with the same capabilities, thoughts, and goals as all other beings. That's when it hit him. Apex predators aren't born evil, they just had to be raised right. What if he could prove it? The moment was broken, however, when Morrill was trying to rush Elias to get out of there. "Look, it's been fun and all, but do you really want to get out so soon? You don't think he might want to get a snack with us now, do you?" responded Elias. Before an argument could be struck, Elias heard a voice speak into his head. It was Kaidar. "What is this fun you are speaking of? And why does my friend think I will harm you? Is that the fate they all had?" Kaidar asked. Elias paused at what he was being told, but he couldn't break the facade for him. The beast would never find out just what all was going to happen. "Those are for another time, Kai," Elias said. "But that is a question that I intend to solve." After a tense session with Kaidar, Elias had returned to what would be his living quarters. It was in times like this that he could only feel like he was truly alone in the universe. "What am I doing?" thought Elias. These creatures seemed to be using him for their own machinations. Whether it be weaponization or whatever, all he wanted was to be able to understand those that others could not. Was it all just for naught? "Dr. Thorne, the Stellar Alliance is requesting your presence immediately at the observation tower, Section 13, said a synthetic voice on his speaker. "Report to them." There was no time to stall. Elias nodded and began walking towards where he was asked to go. With the events of the past couple days, it was no secret that he was getting nervous again. When he arrived, he was greeted by a couple different things, being led through the dark areas of the space station, and greeted by various members of the Stellar Alliances. There were the normal guards or other run-of-the-mill people, but it was also the people that he had been studying alongside of him. When he finally arrived, he was greeted by Zinter. "Dr. Thorne, thank you for coming so quickly after the circumstances that we had imposed on you," said Zinter. "After viewing what had occurred today, the higher-ups wanted to have a meeting with you." To his surprise, however, he was not greeted by the leaders of all nations, rather, it was just a single representative. It looked to be something out of the realm of fiction. A being that was completely made out of light, yet at the same time was somehow giving out heat. Its eyes were those of the stars, and it spoke in a language that all others can understand somehow. It was alien. "Dr. Thorne, it is a pleasure to meet you," said the star creature. We apologize for all that we've made you do. After watching you work, however, we feel that you have shown a lot more. This was all starting to get to Elias. He just didn't know what they wanted. Is he going to have to be working here forever? So, tell me about Project Leviathan, Elias said, breaking the tense silence that had fallen over the meeting. The star being simply floated serenely in front of him, a being of pure energy that made Elias feel strangely insignificant despite his lifetime of facing down nature's terrors. Project Leviathan, the council leader echoed, its voice resonating with a power that seemed to vibrate through the very chamber, is the culmination of millennia of intergalactic research. It is a sanctuary, a laboratory, and if necessary, a prison for the most dangerous entities in the cosmos.